Also, a little bit about Startup Grind. So Startup Grind is an event powered by Google for Entrepreneurs. And it's hosted in over 200 cities, over 85 different countries across the world. So it's a great initiative to bring to Bournemouth. And it basically brings together startups and their ecosystems to educate, inspire, and connect each other and entrepreneurs. We're really pleased at Box 44 to be able to host this, so it's a great honour for that. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ollie Whittle. You probably all know him anyway. He's the co-director for the Startup Grind chapter, and he's going to be hosting tonight's chat with James Benamor.
Hello everyone. I'm really excited to see you all here. Thank you so much for turning up, and we're really excited to launch the first Startup Grind in Bournemouth. We're even more excited that James could kick it off, and you'll have the opportunity to ask some questions. He's going to give us a little bit about his background, and we'll open it up to the floor, and we'll cover a few subjects. Feel free to jump in at any time, put your hand up, and we'll get you involved as much as we can. A little bit of background to James. 1999, he started the Richmond Group and then went on to run a host of successful national companies. In 2010, he won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Consumer and Service Products and has more recently just stepped down as CEO of Amigo Loans. So we're going to find out about how James got there and what he's been up to. So James, thank you very much for coming here. Are you comfortable? You've got a drink? You're okay?
Hello? Hello. Sorry, two things. I haven't prepared anything for this, and I have kind of a pathological fear of talking in front of people. So this might go well, or it might go really, really badly. So.
Well, do you want to start from the very beginning and tell us how you, we'll make it nice and easy for you then.
Make it easy, yeah. Okay, so, so we started in 1999. Actually, no, let's go back a little bit further. So I started my first business in probably about 97 when I was probably 18 or something like that. Maybe like 96, I don't know. So my parents had been in business, and I always wanted to run my own company. I certainly, my main motivation actually was not making a lot of money, but I just didn't want to work for people. I didn't enjoy that experience. And so I did sales jobs, like telesales jobs, and on the side I would save up a bit of money, a few £100s, and then kind of have some wacky idea and try and start a business. And the first proper business that I started was the idea I had was writing wills for people by post. So I was thinking, what can you do? The internet existed, but not in a big way. So what could you do with very little startup capital that you could charge people a fee for, that you could do in bulk and potentially make a lot of money. And this idea came to me that kind of loads of people needed a will. You didn't need a solicitor. There was software that could answer kind of 10 or 20 questions, and it would output a document for you that was legally valid. And solicitors charged a couple £100 for it. We could do this by post of a simple multiple choice tick box form for £50. And it just seemed like absolutely the perfect idea. So I'd saved up for kind of 5 or 6 months, and I went out with this. So it's a limited company, all of that stuff. Probably put in a couple of £100. And I didn't have a computer, and they cost like a couple of £1,000 or something in those days. So I went to Radio Rentals, and I got one. Actually, I couldn't get one because I had a really bad credit score. I think that if you just hold that in your head, that story will come back and be useful later. And so my auntie got it in her name, and it cost, I think, 150 quid a month it had 16 meg of RAM, not gig of RAM, meg of RAM. And it cost 150 quid a month, and I had this computer. and I was good from my mum's table. I quit my job, and I was like, this is it, this can make me rich. Before I did that, I did market research. So I literally sat down with a phone book. I was like 18 years old. I sat down with a phone book and I just phoned people and said, I'm phoning from some market research firm or something. I want to ask you some questions about your legal provisions. And 50% of people at random said, I haven't made a will, and yes, it's on my list, I need to do it. And I thought, this is a huge market, and it's such a better product than it's like 5 minutes to fill out this form. And so that was it. So we did it. I did it. Kind of worked out the logo and the paperwork and everything. Like £150 plus the computer of investment, and I was there. And I printed up leaflets. And I went round and I handed them out door to door around Camford Heath. And I sort of run out like in the morning at 5 a.m. and I'd do leaflets, and I'd come back and answer the phone, and it almost never rang. And I did this for like 2, 3, 4 months, actually 6 months in the end. And I kept trying out different wording on the leaflets and different, and I saved up a bit more money and advertised. So I did have some customers, but it wasn't great. And advertised in the newspaper, and it basically ended up that the cost per acquisition was more than the fee that we charged. And I didn't understand it, because there was like 1,000 people seeing that leaflet, and I was sure I'd done a beautiful job on it. And it just didn't compute. It didn't. I think it was like 1 in 2,000 would use the service, even though I knew solidly that 1,000 needed it. And in the end, I quit, and I'd spent maybe 6 months of my life on this. I hadn't gone out with my friends or anything. I just literally I was so sure that this was going to be the thing. And I went back to work for someone else. I was selling debt recovery. And I learned a bit about credit and debt and stuff like that. And I was saving up some more money, and I was going to go again. And later, I realised that what was wrong with that idea was not that people didn't need it. It was something people needed, and it was a better product. But it was something they didn't want. They weren't prioritising it, So you can have a really great idea and a great product, but if it never makes it to the top of someone's daily to-do list, you don't have a business, And so no matter how I did it, I don't think, and I've seen other people try and launch that same business online, and no one's really made a go of it. It was just one of those things, but actually I spent too long, because the first 2 days of doing that, I should have worked out that the cost per acquisition was too high. It was a product that people didn't want, even though they needed it. And there was no way to make that work. And actually the reason is, there's a reason that 50% of people didn't have wills. They didn't want one, because they didn't want to sit down and do that. They wanted to get on with their lives. They didn't want to think about what happened after they died. And actually I was the same. So I don't have an up-to-date will myself, even now, weirdly, even with that story. So that was kind of my first business experience. And then I did some other stuff. I went traveling around India and Thailand and stuff, and I came back, and I'd almost kind of given up on the idea of starting a business. And my auntie was doing was doing a startup. Our family kind of do this sort of thing. I know some people's families, like, they're doctors and lawyers and stuff. My family start stupid businesses, yes, that mostly don't work. And she was starting, and I was helping her. I was working on a building site as a labourer, and I was helping her out. And a weird thing happened. We hit on something that had a really good cost per acquisition. I mean, it was like £2 or something. So you spent £2 on newspaper, you got a customer. You spent £20, you got 10 customers. You did the leaflets thing, yielded 10 times as many customers. So the product, she was actually trying a load of different things, but it was around getting a credit card for people who were refused by their bank. So you've got to go back to kind of 1999, when the internet was just kicking off, and suddenly there was a technical reason why you needed a credit card to actually do things. But the product was more or less our advice. So there wasn't Money Saving Expert or Money Supermarket or anything like that. So the product was, if you've been refused and you don't know where to get a credit card, we'll look at your credit file and we'll find the best credit card for you. And it was one of about 8 or 9 different kind of legal/financial mail order things that we were offering, and it just suddenly flew. And I realised, actually, this is something that's worth doing. So I gave up my job. So I was doing this in the evenings. I gave up my job, and we just started hacking away at it. And we were working from my mum's kitchen table. She was away at the time, and we kind of tried different things, and because it was the right idea, actually, everything worked. Newspaper worked, leaflets worked.
So it just picked up momentum and started to run.
Yeah, answering the phone worked, not answering the phone worked. I mean, literally everything worked. There was a real need. And actually, when I look back, we were terrible at what we were doing. I mean, horrible. My grasp of computers was kind of like we had a free version of Lotus WordPress 1995 or something that we got off the front of a magazine, and still this radio rental 16 megabyte computer or whatever it was. But the idea was good enough, the product fit was good enough that it just flew. People forgave us.
Yeah.
They forgave us being terrible on the phone. They forgave us being terrible at writing letters or whatever. And it got to the point that the phone was ringing too much that we couldn't answer it, and we kind of had to employ someone. And I learnt later that's kind of the mark of a good business, is that the business drags you along rather than you having to drag it.
So you were just keeping up with demand rather than actually instigating a market.
Yeah, and so I stayed on the phone. We didn't make tons and tons of money. I think the first year we made £35,000 profit. Yeah. But the first month of the second year we made £35,000 profit as well. Right. So I mean, it was like, it was growing. And at some point there, so you kind of in 2001, we were like, this is great, we've done really well. We should be a proper company. So a friend of mine was a graphic designer, and I paid him a few £100 to smarten up our what was it, brochures or something like that.
And your logos forms. And just
all of that stuff. And he did actually a really, really beautiful job. It was lovely. And we sent it out. And at the same time, like as happens in loads of startups, you're changing a lot of things at a time because you're moving quickly. So we'd employed a couple of other people, and we'd got a second office next to our office. I mean, I mean like literally kind of a tiny little room, like bedroom size. But
you moved off the kitchen table at this point?
Yeah. Well, actually, we had to move from the kitchen table because one of our neighbours, my mum's flat was residential, and one of my neighbours called the freeholder and said they're running a business from this house. So yeah.
So you wouldn't have moved off the kitchen
table? We wouldn't have. If something like Box 44 was here, we'd have been here. Yeah. But office space, you had to sign like a 5-year lease or something. Yeah. So, but we managed to find a little office, like a tiny little kind of the equivalent of a bedsit, and it was like a tiny little room. Anyway, so where was I? So sorry, this is longer than 15 minutes.
No, this is good. This is good. This is really interesting.
So we changed a lot of stuff, but so we're coming up to kind of, I don't know, maybe first year, somewhere towards the end of the first year, in the middle. And we had some staff, and we had some really cool postal leaflets. Remember, this isn't an internet business, this is a by post business, which is what internet businesses used to be. Yeah. And suddenly everything started crashing, like our turnover was half, our new customers were half, like, same number of inquiries, but everything was going down. And I thought maybe it was the fact that it wasn't us on the phone anymore, primarily, that we had a couple of people on the phone who were like kind of wondering whether they're doing the same job. And actually we trialled changing everything apart from this beautiful graphically designed leaflet. And eventually I said, the only other thing that's changed is this, and we changed it back and the figures went back up. And it was the weirdest thing in the world. So something that looked more, what's the word? Something, like crappy. I mean, it looked bad, you know. I mean, it looked like someone who had never used a computer before and just knocked it up in 5 minutes, which is more or less what it was converting twice as many people as this beautiful graphic design thing from someone who'd gone to university and stuff. And so we did it, and we just cracked on and went back to that style. And later on, I realised actually, because later on we started doing a lot of trials on newspaper adverts and stuff like that. And I realised that the reason people wanted that crappy like leaflet thing was the same reason that they wanted a small advert. So when we got a bit of money, we trialled bigger adverts in the newspapers, colour adverts, blah, blah, blah. And actually, we were really the only company that was doing proper A/B testing. I say proper. We had like literally separate phones that we answered for the two different adverts that we were running, an A phone and a B phone, and we like sent out forms and we wrote a little code on the corner of the form so when it came back. So we did loads of trials in the second year to work out what people wanted to see. And it was always the adverts in the newspaper, the smaller it was, the more response, the misaligned, spelling mistakes, weird kind of like 2 or 3 different fonts. It was just the oddest thing. And it was only about 10 years later that it struck me. I was somewhere like a farmer's market or something, and people were selling like jams and chutneys, and they had just like a brown paper label on them with like a handwriting. Yeah. And there's an evolution in that market. Things went from brown paper labels to proper printing, to colour printed, to full colour, like lids and stuff like that. Yeah. And now people have kind of lost faith in big companies, and they wanted something homemade. And actually, where finance was at that point in time was our customers had been rejected from banks, and they'd been turned down so many times, and they really actually hated big companies that looked proper because their experience was that they were going to get rejected. And so looking like a crappy little company made us more desirable to them. Yeah. So the bigger we got, the less desirable. So we ended up trying to be a small company from the outside as we grow. There's I'm talking too much. Keep going. We're going to go to questions, but there's a semi-interesting to me story. So if any of you read Richard Branson's book, I think it's either Screw It, Let's Do It, or the autobiography one. Anyway, one of those, one of the chapters he opens by talking about the history of his name, Branson. So he said Branson was originally Brandson, the son of a brander, so someone in his history was a cattle brander. Yeah. And he talks about the concept of cattle branding and how he's kind of done the same with businesses, and his brand is his word and all of this stuff. And there's an interesting kind of semi-parallel story about a guy called Samuel Maverick, who somewhere in the late 1800s owned a big chunk of land in Texas. And it's where the word maverick comes from. So you've called people a maverick. And where it comes from is that he was a cattle owner, but he refused to brand his cattle. And he said that the reason that he did that was because he didn't want to hurt them. But most people acknowledge that the reason he didn't do it was that because he was the only person that didn't brand his cattle, any cattle that weren't branded belonged to him. In fact, any cattle anywhere in the state of Texas that were unbranded were known as mavericks. Yeah. That's why people who like kind of stray outside of social norms are known now as mavericks. It was just kind of a turn of phrase that grew from there. And in a way, we were mavericks in those early days because there were loads of customers who wanted a branded finance company. And everyone was trying to be a branded finance company, but no one recognized that there were a significant, I mean like 20, 30% of people who specifically wanted an unbranded finance company, who wanted something that was not big, was not clever, was not, was not shiny. And we were that for people. And I suppose at first we didn't even realize we were that, but through a combination of A/B testing and stuff, we realized, and we kind of stuck that way. So, God, 10 minutes probably, I've only got through like 2 years. So I'll try and go quickly. So things worked out. We were on the phone, I was on the phone a lot. Customers kept phoning up, so we were still doing credit cards, but customers kept phoning up and saying, well, great, but can you get me a loan? And after a while, I was, we really should really think about this, because, and we just put together a service. We actually were the first company to look at every lender in the UK.
Okay.
Not from a point of view of selling a lender's product. And actually the reason for that is we tried, in like the second year, we phoned around a load of lenders and said, hey, would you like us to work with you? And they were just awful. They was really annoying to deal with, and we weren't big enough or whatever, and their process. So we just said, well, fuck it, we'll just
All right, there's no children in the crowd.
We'll be the first company that doesn't work for lenders but works for customers to find any lender that exists for them and won't take a fee. So we took a fee from the customer, didn't take a fee from the lender. And weirdly it kind of worked, So we were lucky a couple of times in the early days that we had kind of 2 out of 2 ideas that worked.
So again, did you see an early surge, early demand?
Yeah, so there was a huge demand, and then actually one day, kind of 2-3 years in, we were like, well, why don't we, the people who are applying for credit cards, why don't we offer them loans as well afterwards and cross-market them and kind of put them on a database? I mean, it's honestly, this is it's not clever stuff. It's a combination of right place at the right time, and being just every day coming in and saying, can we just be a bit better than this?
Yeah.
Could we think of another thing that we could do that's
it also sounds
better?
like you're open to testing lots of different things, and if one doesn't work, then you move on to the next very quickly. Yeah. So you're just trying new things each
you've
day.
got to remember, we didn't have a lot of money, we didn't take investment, we didn't have, you kind of have to, and I'm sure, Leon, with this place, you won't run for 2 years a business model that doesn't work. You're going to try something. If it doesn't work, 2 weeks later, you're going to change. And actually, a lot of businesses nowadays, they start up and they go through this pitch, and they're like, right, this is our plan, and we have to execute this plan, and here are our projections, and no one's got a fucking clue. No one's got a clue what's going to happen 2 weeks from now.
No.
Your projections are just rubbish, it's just like write some numbers on the wall and then just paint over them. It doesn't matter what you're projecting. You have to test things, and then they might work or they might not, and most things won't work. So we went through that, and then we grew. Again, we had an idea of there are other lenders who are turning people down, and they're turning people down. What do they do when they turn people down? So we phoned around a few, and a few of them said, well, we just tell them to go away. So we said, well, hey, why don't you give them our number, and every time someone phones us, we'll give you £5. And we had, I think we had like 7 or 8 members of staff at that point. Okay. And I took a guy off the phone called Mark, and I said to him, hey, why don't you go to the library, get all the yellow pages, to make a list of all the lenders in the UK, all the brokers and everything, and then just phone them one by one. And it turned out he was the right guy for the job, because he went and did it. He went and did it in his own time. So that was the weekend, came and went, and he came in and he said, I spent the whole weekend in the library and I've made this spreadsheet and stuff. It turned out, he was on like £6 an hour or something, but he wanted to do more, and I gave him the opportunity to, and it went really well. So he phoned a few brokers, got a few deals, and then we made a little project in the corner of the office. And we went from 10 members of staff to maybe 100 members of staff, and that's weird, yeah? I mean, it's like...
So what time span's that, from 10 to 100?
Like 6 months or something.
6 months?
Because we just kept signing deals. People just kept saying yes, because it was just the right thing at the right time. They didn't like saying no to people, and we made these like cards that said don't say no, say Advantage Loans. We stuck them, we went around all the call centres and stuck them to everyone's computers. And we trained people, and we'd hand out like mouse mats and stuff like that. We just had a fun 6 months of going around the country and visiting people. And the calls just kept flowing in. It was fucking great. And we, so in the meantime, the company was growing, and I had, I was like, well, this is amazing. We're making, we were on track to make maybe £1 million a year at that point. I was like, it's just like crazy. I'm 26 years old, 27 years old. And we had become the largest loan broker in the UK. In terms of volumes of customers, there were these big guys like Ocean Finance who were making millions of pounds. We weren't, but by number of customers, we were like kind of like the Steptoe & Son of the industry, like the rag and, sorry, you're all too young for that, the rag and bone men, like the scrap metal merchants. And we had lots and lots, like 10,000 people phoning us, transferring to us. And then we'd take them, put them on the database, remarket to them if they didn't use the service and stuff, and cross-market the two different products. And it looked great. So I took that time away from the office, me and Mark, and we went and we met a load of people, and we felt like big boys. And I, at the same time, maybe because I met so many different people, so many shiny call centres, and every office we went into was so cool and lovely. And our office had still been, like we'd done a bailiffs thing where the people in the office next door to us were getting repossessed, or whatever you call it, gone bankrupt. And we'd bought all their desks for like, I think it was like £200 or something. So that was like everything of ours was like patched together.
This is in Bournemouth, right?
Yeah, so we were on Post Office Road. There's a, what is there now? They're like doing it up into apartments, but it was it was above Bristol and West House, I think it was quite cool. Where was I? So we went round, we had all these meetings, and I'd come back and go, right, that's another 1,000 customers a week or whatever. But I kind of felt a little bit like envious of all these shiny businesses and all these people with these kind of actually great logos and great foyers, reception desks, all of this stuff. And we were growing and growing, so we moved offices just up Richmond Hill. And we had, like I said, we were making tens of thousands of pounds a month, and I said, well, we're gonna get proper.
Yeah.
And I suppose you know what's coming now. And so we hired from Lloyd's. We hired in 2 managers. We hired a call centre manager and a couple of team managers. And I phoned up an office. Which got a furniture company, and I got these really nice desks with these partitions, like these kind of blue soundproof partitions, and so everyone had like their own space, all in rows, teams and rows, and it was so orderly, so beautiful and precise, the whole thing. And we bought this phone system. The phone system did like predicted dialing and like logged agent. It cost like £250,000, and it basically, if you weren't on an inbound call, it would pick from a list and automatically dial out to customers. And then we loaded our whole database onto that. And the idea was, hey, agents are only busy half the time. If we could, in the other half of the time, keep them busy doing outbound calls, that's all just like free money, free stuff. So we did this, and we went live with it. And so that was a roller coaster of a 6-month period. And we'd gone from being me and 10 or 15 people in a room At that point, it was the kind of place where I would answer the phone. I'd get someone like Mark, and I'd say, "Hey, why don't you come and talk to me about this? And why don't we go and do a little project?" And you know, someone else was running spreadsheets, and someone else was. Everyone was involved in every aspect of what we were doing. To basically lots of rows of people all trained and processing, and if they're not on an inbound call, they're on an outbound call. And I was out of the office as well. It looked really good, and it was probably the worst thing that we've ever done, because we had probably about a month like that. And then there were some complaints made by someone who had come in. Oh, also we were like hiring people willy-nilly. So,
complaints by staff?
Yeah, some complaints made by staff someone, a member of staff had phoned BBC Watchdog and said, you know, I was told to lie to customers or something like that to hit my sales targets. And Watchdog sent in someone with as a new member, as a pretend member of staff with a hidden camera, and they filmed agents like talking and saying things, and it wasn't nice. It really wasn't nice. And they broadcast it on TV, and we had like, it was like prime time. It was back when there were like 4 channels that everyone watched, and we had a kind of like a 10-minute slot at 7 o'clock just before he said us there. And I mean, it was ugly. It was really horrible. And I sat there watching it on TV, and I watched the repeat, and it pops up again in the middle of the night one night when I woke up. I turned on the TV and it was on again. And I watched it and I thought, it's not the company that I built. I don't recognise this. I don't recognise what people are saying. Yeah. But I hadn't spoken to those people. I'd probably never met them, you know. Yeah. And they'd been trained by people that I didn't really know. And they were brought into an environment that was basically a battery farm. And not only that, but actually, whereas people used to join us and stay with us for like 2 years or something, at this point, people were joining us and staying with us for like a day and then just walking out. And, you know, which is weird, because actually it looked like a really nice office, whereas before it looked like a fucking horrible office.
Yeah. But it had more of a family feel, I guess, at that point. But
what I realised was that actually people didn't enjoy working for big battery farm, shiny organisations. And actually, in the same way that our customers didn't want that graphic designed bank feel thing. And actually, the most useful, the most engaged, the happiest our staff was when there were 10 of us or 5 of us, and actually I was a horrible manager. I was terrible. You know, I didn't set people targets or give them one-to-ones, but I just talked to them. You know, we just talked about stuff that was right or wrong, and I'd say, "What do you think? You know, what the hell are we going to do about this? I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing." And that actually was a really good working environment. Weirdly, a lot of the people who worked there at that point still say it was a good place to work. And we went through this. We were a good place to work, not through design, just by being, I don't know, rubbish. And not only were we a good place to work, we created loads of people who went on to be entrepreneurs or to be directors in our company or whatever. Mark, who I talked about went on to do a management buyout on a piece of our company that he started, and you know, now runs his own company, employs 20-odd people, really cool fintech thing that he's doing. That happened because he was one of the first 10 or so people that worked for us. No one out of the next 100 did that, and probably no one out of the next 1,000 did that. Yeah. We created more value out of people. We had happier people. People worked weirdly for less money, harder. You know, took more ownership when we were really small. And then we said, how can we make this happen? How can we recreate that situation that we had when there were 10 of us to be, you know, like when we were 100 or 200 or
Yeah.
300 people. And actually the answer was, well, there's a few answers. First of all, we got rid of all the desks, and we got rid of the predictive dialer, and we stopped people having like kind of faceless kind of relationships. We started agents appraising their managers. I met with every agent every month, and they would do their manager's appraisal with their manager there, obviously. Like, so I'd literally write it down, and that would be their manager's appraisal. So every person managed their manager. There were loads.
So there's a lot tighter relationships from that point.
Yeah, there was loads of stuff that we did, but more or less the most important thing that we did was we just gave people problems. So if there was something we wanted to fix, we didn't hire an expert to do it. We just like take someone off the phones and say,
Yeah.
that's a problem for us. You know, our network needs to be fixed, or we need some wallboards, or we want to do this secured loan brokering thing. Why don't you try and work out how it works? And then over the next 5 years, we started probably 8 companies that way, just taking call center agents, giving them a little bit of money, a bit of desk space, a bit of support, and just saying, try this thing. And a lot of it didn't work, and some of it worked. One of the things that worked was lending. So after Watchdog, actually, a lot of the lenders said they didn't want to work with us anymore, and we were a bit screwed, because we were like, well, how can you be a broker without lenders allowing you to pass customers? So we started lending our own money, and we had maybe £1 million saved, and we just thought, we'll just try this. And we had this idea that if you can't lend to them on credit score, because they either haven't got a credit score or they've got a really bad credit score, could you do something else? And we just went with the guarantor idea, because that's what banks used to do before credit score. So we just thought, we'll just try that, and it worked. It was good. But we also tried like 3 other things. We tried secured lending and lending on credit score, but in a different way, and it worked horribly. It was terrible. And again, like, we were really, really bad at lending. Like our first few contracts, I just kind of like made up, you know, the contracts. I just like got a Capital One contract for a credit card and just like changed some of the words that said credit card to loan and stuff.
But you were seeing high demand again. People
but it was
wanted
the right thing at the right time in the right place. Yeah. And actually, because we were crap at doing things, and we were almost universally crap at every single thing we ever did in the beginning. Because we were crap at it, the only things that stuck were good ideas. So I'm not telling you about all the stupid. We at one point we thought we'd try and do scratch cards on this premium rate number, and at some other point we tried. I can't even remember. I've kind of tried to wipe all that, but there were also loads of other startup ideas that just burnt money, but only a very small amount of money.
So because you'd shut them down quickly?
Well, we kind of had to, because we didn't have a lot of money. But we started a load of businesses. They didn't work, but what was FLM, what's now Amigo, worked. It was horror. I mean, we were terrible at it, but it worked. So in the first year, we lent maybe £2 million in the first year, which right now is like a couple of days. But it took us I think 20 members of staff to pay out to pay that out. So at that point, we basically took 20 members of staff in the first year to pay out what it would take 1 member of staff a day or so to pay out right now. So it gives you kind of an idea of how inefficient. It was just inefficient, and I don't know, it was all very manual, and we were just a lot of scratching our heads and stuff. But we lost some money, and then we made some money, and maybe a couple of years in, we turned a decent profit, and then it started to grow. And we also started a debt management company we aimed to be the first ever all online debt management company, the first place you could go and completely online manage your debts, and we did manage that. And we took 10 call center agents, we split them into 2 teams. The Apprentice TV show had just come out, and Mark took one team and mentored them, and I took the other team. And we gave them £10,000, and we said, just do this thing, and the first team that turns a profit is the winner. And one team did turn a profit, so that team was the winner, and it was called Debtline. The other one was something else, and that company just shut down. And of those 5 people, I think 2 of them ended up as directors in the company.
Right.
And that's random. I mean, that's just call center agents. So you take 10 call center agents who are quite good. In there is 1 or 2 people who have the potential to be directors.
Yeah.
If they're given the chance and given the right kind of freedom and pressure. Directors are not rare people. People who can create £1 million businesses aren't rare, but the circumstances are quite rare, especially in big companies. So we tried to make those circumstances not rare, and we created, like I say, 5 or 6 successful companies. We counted the successful company as making £1 million in its second year. I think we made 5 companies that did that: an insurance company, a debt management company, an online loan brokerage, obviously Amigo, FLM. Can't remember the other one, will come back to me. Deadline ended up, we sold it for £8 million, and it made us probably about another 5 or 6 million in the few years that we ran it in profit, which is quite good if you take that as a story of 10 people plus £10,000 investment. With nothing else, but actually the story of Deadline is horrible. It's just crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. At one point, all of our accounts, like we'd bought an off-the-shelf system, and we had to reconcile all of our accounts, and we had to hire in, I think, like 18 financial people to do manual reconciliation. I mean, it was horrible. Anyway.
So what was the timescale between launch and sale of that particular company? So
it was maybe 2006 to 2009 or something, 3 years.
So 3 years.
Yeah. So anyway, we ran that. We ran some other businesses. They went okay. We got a loan from the bank for Amigo. We kept putting our profits back in. I personally took out very, very low profit. Up until really very recently, actually, and then at some point the credit crunch happened. Remember that? And no one could borrow, and we'd just got a £50 million loan from the bank. It was silly. It was like really cheap, and they shouldn't have given it to us by today's standards. And we got it, and then a month later, the guy who arranged it phoned me up and said, I don't work in that department anymore, and no one does, and if you break one of the covenants, like one of the rules associated, of which there were hundreds, we'll basically liquidate your company. So between me and you, don't break any covenants. Wow. and I'm off. And then that was the credit crunch, like no one would lend to anyone. And actually, it's quite cool. It's like that bit in Forrest Gump where there was a big storm and he was the only boat left. So we were the only lenders for like 3 or 4 years, and we had a chunk of money, and we were horrible at lending. I mean, at some point we had a 3-month backlog. If you sent in a paper form to us, which was the only way you could apply in those days, it was 3 months before you got your payout, just because there was such a stack of processing and we hadn't properly automated it. Now I think our payout's like, an hour or something like that, with the phone calls and everything. So that was it. And I think that's probably the end of the story, because the rest of it is quite boring. It's just we ran a company and incrementally every day said, how can we be better at this? Yeah. So
I mean, maybe bring us up to where you stepped down and what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I stepped down like 18 months ago. I'm still Richmond Group, which owned Amigo, is still a big shareholder. We still own, apart from the staff shares, we still own everything, the whole of Amigo. But we've taken about 60-70 million out of Amigo, and we are investing in companies. So we're investing in startups. I get to do what I love. I get to meet a lot of people who are talking or actually doing kind of the do of starting up businesses. And we're also starting up a couple of companies on our own as well, just on our own with little teams of people, just to try out some ideas.
So you're in the office rather than sitting on the beach?
I'm not on the beach. No.
Okay, so you're still heavily involved with quite a lot of the companies or the day-to-day running and part of.
Yeah,
what's going
yeah, I
on.
suppose so. I like to think I'm like kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi in the second and third Star Wars movies,
Right.
you know, like kind of just like popping up and reminding people of the values and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to know how long I've
Okay.
wasted. That was supposed to be 15 minutes.
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
shit.
what are we on?
Sorry.
I don't know. Well, it's a pretty amazing story. So I'd like to open up to anyone in the audience who's got some questions. I've got quite a few questions, but I'll pass it over to you guys if anyone wants to ask something.
Hello.
Go for it.
Hello, I'm Jeremy. Pleased to meet you.
Hello, Joe.
Evening, everyone. When you were saying, it's a bit morbid, about your first business with the wheels, and you said you went around Camford Heath and handed out all the flyers.
Yeah.
Did you, at the same time, because the thing that kind of light bulb went off in my mind was, were you going around kind of old people's homes and care homes at the same time? Or was that kind of a bit too far?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I was just going for wherever you could hand out the most leaflets in a day. I was just going for volume, but yeah, I should have probably targeted, I don't know. But I don't think there's that many old people's homes that you can actually get into and hand out leaflets to. But no. Hello.
Hi, Lucienne. It sounds like you were just reacting the whole way through with a team and growing and making errors and responding from that. Did you at any point have a mentor or somebody that you respected that was maybe proven beyond you? Or you just kept hustling the whole way through yourself?
No. I mean, and actually, you know what? It would have been really nice at times just to have someone to say, "What the hell do I do now?"
By the way, don't do that.
yeah, or don't do that. Yeah. I think a lot of our story is quite atypical. So, for example, we didn't raise money, we didn't employ experts. Like we never employed someone who had a CV with the skill set of the business that we were starting at all. The only people that we ever employed who had a skill set of anything other than call center agent were in roles that we didn't want to have a competitive advantage in, like doing your accounts or something. You wouldn't employ a call center agent to do your accounts, but at the same time, you don't make £1 million company by being the best at doing your accounts. Maybe you do in some industries, but not in what we did. So no, but I did read books. Books are really, really, really important. So I read books, and I read books by people who had done things, like people who had built businesses.
Of other people who had proven.
Yeah, and you've got to be careful about books. A lot of people have written books who have never started a business and made £1 million business or whatever, £1 billion business, and they're writing books about this is what makes people successful. And you're like,
with no evidence.
Okay, but you know, yeah, I think I like to think that people who write their story in a book pour maybe a year or two of their time into that, and actually, you know, you can pay £10,000 for someone to give you advice from a consultancy firm who's never run a business, and they'll charge you £10,000 for a week's worth of consultancy, or for $7.99 or something, you can read 2 years of distilled thinking from someone who has run £1 billion company. So I go for the book every time.
So if you know your own industry and you're confident and you've got a good team, within reason, you don't think it's too risky to do it without a mentor?
I mean, if you can get a mentor that's relevant to your industry, absolutely do it. Do it every time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Ilham Shaybani. Looking back, do you think, what would you do differently, or do you think your mistakes are actually part of your success?
It's a good question. I mean, wouldn't it be great if you could go back and do everything and not have all the terrible bits? And I like to think that, I suppose, if I could go back, I wouldn't have bothered with the brokerage company. I'd have gone straight for the lending or.
But surely you learn through the mistakes.
But this is it, yeah. So if I literally went back now, then I would, as quickly as possible, try and get to where I am now. But I wasn't that person. I wasn't me now. And I think actually it took me a number of years to believe that I belonged at that level. So I wouldn't. I mean, I never thought I would build £1 million company, a company that made me a millionaire. And I remember actually saying to people, you know, I could work my arse off for the next 20 years and become a millionaire, but I'm not really because at the rate we were making money at that time. So in the early days, I really, actually I still do, I valued lifestyle and working with people I liked and, you know, that kind of stuff. And actually really most of the pressure to expand came from competition or came from threats to the business. So, you know, when we went into lending, when we went into lending it was because of Watchdog. When we went into loans, it was because one of our very earliest members of staff, so our company at that time was called Credit Gain Services, and our whole business model was advertising in newspapers. There was a girl who worked for me who was one of our first call centre agents, and she left and started a company called Credit Assured Services and advertised literally next to us who newspaper, and with a fee of I think £10 less than ours, so £30 instead of £40 or whatever. And I remember thinking, this is the end of us, you know, and we had to, like, how the hell are we going to deal with this thing? And one of the ways we dealt with that was going into loans, and another way was looking at, you know, A/B testing our brochures and all of that stuff. And actually, we came out a lot stronger for that, like almost we didn't mean to. But if I'd have never had any competition and nothing bad ever happened, we'd still be making £30,000 a year probably, and I'd just be like happy with that. It was, it almost happened, each stage had to happen for me to believe it was possible. That's weird, isn't it, you know? But, you know, similarly, you know, once you've lent £1 million in a day, you actually believe that's possible. And then once you believe it's possible, you say, well, why the hell hasn't it happened today, you know? And then you go about solving that problem. So, I think mistakes and general incremental progress has been really important to me to believe that that's possible. Yeah.
And is that part of your daily motivation as well? To, you know, when you wake up, you're thinking about how you can better the company and how you can improve.
I'd love to say that I'm one of those people. You know, you read about them who are like, you know, I wake up and I go for a run and then I do meetings and I'm on my phone in the gym or whatever. So I wake up. I've got kids. I've got lots and lots of kids. Really, I've got 7 kids. And so I wake up normally when one of them cries or something, and then I go down and make breakfast and take them to the bus or whatever. And I don't really think a lot about work, and I'm terrible, and I'm addicted to my phone, but I'm not really that, I don't do anything that useful on it. I look at Facebook a lot and Snapchat now. I mean, I got into Snapchat. And I'm not very structured about doing stuff in a very effective way.
One of my questions was going to be your productivity secret.
So, no. I mean, I tell you what, honestly, my productivity secret is I have a small part of me that's depressive. So at some point in a day or a week, if we haven't made any progress, I start to feel really, really down.
Right.
And maybe some people drink or take drugs or something like that to perk themselves up. The only way I can get myself out of that kind of slump is by making some bloody progress in something I'm doing.
So do you continue progress to almost avoid that feeling that you know may come?
Yeah, probably. No, I mean, it's an important... So my tiny little mental illness is probably the most useful part of my character in terms of doing something, you know, doing constructive things. Interestingly, I don't have to make, you know, 10 million pounds or a deal or something like that. Progress can be anything, any kind of, you know, any kind of improvement in any aspect, as long as it's meaningful. So we've got a little company we've started called Momini, which is aiming to improve the speed at which people learn things. And the idea behind it is we all go to school, and you know, for about 10 years of our life we learn French or German or something like that, and none of us bloody speak it. Like, we just literally don't. So how many hours and millions of pounds are spent on teaching us all this language, and we never learn it? And that hasn't changed in the last 30 years. But computers have changed everything else. They've changed the way finance works, and they've changed the way we buy holidays, and they've halved the price of almost everything else. But the price of teaching someone not to learn French is still really high. And how could computers solve that problem? So there's 5 of us in a little, 4 of us in a little office in Walton House, and we play around with trying to solve that problem. And little improvements that we make to this little test app give me as much of a buzz as, I don't know, if we did something huge in Amigo and it made us an extra million, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million or whatever. So yeah, the desire to progress is probably the only productivity hack that I can give anyone. If you like progression, then try and think about your work as a part of your progression, as a part of a satisfying part of your life.
Am I right as well, when you were working for other companies, that you were frustrated with the lack of speed and appetite for growth? So that's part of it as well. You like to take on a project and move quickly and see where it can go.
Yeah. So I was dissatisfied with ultimately the trajectory that I was on. Yeah. So I liked sales job. I'm only talking years ago, but I liked sales jobs because you earn a bit more if you worked harder. But there was like a ceiling to that, and it seemed that I wasn't going to get much past being the top salesperson or something. But yeah, it's probably important to have some urgency as well. Sorry.
I've just realised I've hogged all the questions.
Yeah. Where are we, Leon? Seeing as you're hosting us.
Just going back to your investment pot, which is quite interesting to a lot of people, I'm sure, in the room. How obtainable is that investment, and how are you planning to validate your investment opportunities, and what categories do they fit in, if any? How broad is your investment criteria?
Yeah, so we're playing it by ear. We've looked at which areas are we most excited about. So largely technology. I mean, when we started, technology wasn't where we are, but 15 years later, technology is everything in what we do in finance. So we're looking mostly at technology companies. We've looked at which areas haven't yet been disrupted. So, loads of areas: travel, food costs a quarter of what it cost when I was a kid for most basic food. Most things technology has massively reduced the price of. But actually, we're not better off as a nation. We struggle as much as our parents struggled, which is weird because technology is doing so much work for us. And the reason is largely that there's very few sectors which cost more now than they used to. And so we're really, really interested in those sectors and why haven't they been disrupted and what is going to disrupt them. So where we are is, financial services. So still people pay a hell of a lot of money in interest because of imperfections in the system of being able to price risks and stuff like that. And that's where we come from. So financial services. Fintech, but also education technologies, as I just spoke about. I don't think people learn any faster and schools aren't any more effective or efficient, in fact probably less so for ed tech, and also property tech. So why is it costing us twice, 3 times as much of our monthly wage to rent or buy a home as it did previously, and how can technology help us with that?
How do you validate that opportunity? If you see any of those criteria are matched to your investment strategy, what are the key things you're looking at to say this is something that's investable?
Yeah, so my history is actually being quite bad at execution, but hitting on really, really good things. And really good things are products that have a huge need where people, so it's, where people will virtually crawl over hot coals or something to get to them. So what we're looking for, and it's hard, but we're going to keep looking. We're looking for teams of people or individuals who have got an idea which, when you show it to the target market, they absolutely need it. And that doesn't matter if that target market is only 100 people or something. They will say, that is the most important thing in my life right now. That's at the top of my to-do list. So if you remember the wills thing never made it to anyone's top of their to-do list. We're looking for stuff that does get to the top of your to-do list.
How do you present that to you?
I mean, drop us an email or something. Yeah, we're local. No one else? Hello.
What's your proudest moment of your business career?
God. It's probably the first time we won the best companies to work for thing. There's like well, we didn't win it, but we were in it. We were like 30th best company to work for in the UK. So you remember the story about we the horrible battery call centre and all of that, and we sat down, and Scott works for me, so Scott was one of the managers at the time, so I don't know if you were fishing here, Scott, because you were important in the situation. So we sat down and we said, what the hell are we going to do about this? You know, we can't have this situation where people come and go before they can even be trained, and they don't enjoy working here, and they don't ever learn our values and all of that. And we had to do a load of stuff. But the most important thing that we did was we said, you have to respect that people who work for us have a choice. They have 100 choices of where to work. And you have to, if you want the best people and you want people to stay forever and give everything to you, you have to delight them. You have to look at, you know, what the hell, what can you offer them that no one else can offer them? And we went through 2 years of like tweaking things and changing things and how, you know, what's most important to people and what's less important and stuff. And we went from being probably the worst place to work in Bournemouth to being the only or the highest ranked company in the whole of, I think, the southeast or something, in terms of a place to work. And I was probably a bit more proud because I was drunk at the time, but we were there at the ceremony, what do you call it, the award ceremony or something. And actually, nicely, we've managed to probably get in that list more years, more often than not, over the last 10 years, which is really cool. But yeah.
Cool. I've got a question from Twitter, if that's all right.
Okay.
So when do you know it's the right time to give up the day job and start your own thing?
So for me, I mean, I did it a few times and I was wrong, so I'm not sure I know. But for me, it was actually just it was when the phone was ringing so much and there was so much work to do that I physically couldn't work and do the job. So yeah, I mean, it was like a simple calculation. I do not have enough hours to sleep and do my job and run this business, because it was a good idea. You know, the times when it wasn't a good idea was when I saved up. Actually, the businesses that didn't work out, I saved up a bit more money. I had like one of them, I had £1,000 on ex capital. The one that did work, I started with £100. So, you know, it's down to how good the idea is. And I think, actually, honestly, the natural human thing is to fall in love with your own business idea and to think that it's definitely a great idea, and then to go about proving it to yourself and the rest of the world. But the truth is, there are so many incredible ideas, and there's also so many crap ones. And actually, the really crap ones are painless. They're great. You try them, they fail, you go, this is terrible. The dangerous thing is the okay ones, the ones that are just about break even and you pour your heart into them and all of that. So, yeah.
I've got another one from a student. So, do you have any advice for students who are trying to balance their studies with a startup venture?
I don't know. I mean, I left school at 15, so I probably, if I did it again, I would be so upset if my kids left school any time before they were about 21. And I would say to them, you know, you can do startups later. But for me, it was the most important education I had. So I don't think I could have learnt more at university. And, you know, because it was a good idea, it was the right thing to prioritise that over anything else. So.
Hey, the products that span out when you were at Richmond Group were all financial related?
Sorry,
they were all financial related, all the projects?
All the ones we started, yeah, more or less. Yeah, financial, debt, insurance, yeah.
Was that because you were in the sector and so deep, and the new ones are because they're your passions rather than the...
So yeah, I mean, one of the reasons was we had a big brokerage company, so we had thousands of people, like we had data. we had customers. So it was actually quite cheap for us to trial new products because you had customers and you could just divert some customers or text message some customers or email them or whatever. So we had marketing rights and stuff like that. We did try other things, and actually a lot of the time we kidded ourselves that we were the best at this, so we'd be the best at everything else, and we sort of talked about, what if we got into something else. And actually, you know what, it's hard. It's hard doing something that you don't know about. You're basically at day one again. So I don't want to, one thing that's really important, if you go away and think you've learned something today, you've learned about running a loans brokerage business and running a guarantor lender circa 2005. You've learned nothing else. That what I'm saying here relates to those things, and probably if I was to talk to you, from having started a different business, my rules of business and what works and what doesn't would be completely different. So I'm sorry about that. But yeah, success in one industry does not necessarily transfer into another. And the other stuff that we're doing, honestly, we've put into education technology, we've put a few £1 million, like £3 or £4 million. Into property technology, we put a couple of £1 million. Property and education is, property and finance is quite similar, but even so, it's painful. You don't know. You think you know how to do it, and you don't. So yeah. If you learn something, if you're good at one thing, you're good at that thing, basically. And then, hello.
Hi, my name's Julian Saunders. You mentioned earlier that it's very hard to project sales figures for a startup company. How do you go about valuing a startup company that's looking for investment? How do you go about valuing one?
So, I mean, you have to. So hopefully the companies that we're talking to actually will have some numbers, will have achieved some growth already, some traction, and will have. Honestly, it is a bit of a guess. It's a bit of a guess because you just have to believe that something is going to get to a certain point. And actually, most of the valuations that we've done to date haven't been so much based on how much the company is worth, but it's more based on how much the company would need to get to where it's going to be, and whether we believe that end point, which might be 5 years, 10 years away, is a £1 million profit a year business or a £100 million profit a year business, and then the likelihood of them getting there. But there's no magic answer, and anyone who tells you there is lying, basically.
Thank you.
So I think we've got time for one more question.
Just snuck in. So having stepped down from Amigo 18 months ago, but still owning it, what advice would you give to yourself being 18 months smarter, and what advice would you give to anyone else doing a similar kind of thing?
That's a really interesting question, actually. So when I stepped down, we did a few things. We started a property tech company and an education tech company, and we started looking and kind of thinking about what we're going to do with 60-70 million pounds, because you don't want to start. Actually, historically, it's taken us 10 or 20,000 pounds to start a successful company. Sometimes 100,000 or 200,000, but you don't want to start like 50 companies all at the same time. So we were quite kind of tentative, and actually we've only really started 2 companies and invested in a couple of others. Honestly, the biggest risk for us right now is that we don't have a limit for how much money we can put into an idea, and the risk is that, and also the ego thing. So my ego says I'm a successful businessman, I shouldn't fail. And the risk is that in the old days I couldn't afford to fail, so I didn't. Well, I had to fail early, and if I could get back 18 months, I'd say to myself, try more stuff. Admit when stuff isn't working earlier, even if you've got the money to fund it. Don't fund it. give things less of a chance, but spread yourself wider, because there's always good ideas. There's ideas that are so good that you don't have to be good at execution. If you sit there kind of going, oh, if only maybe we could be a bit better at this and a bit better at this, and then it would work, forget it. There's a good idea out there. Actually, really, that's me from 10 years ago telling me from now what I should be doing. Yeah, I was smarter then.
Okay, I think we've got time for, yeah? So thank you very much to everyone, and obviously a massive thank you to Jim.